The restaurant was quiet. Almost too quiet. Behind the counter, a young waiter slammed down a tray, his hands shaking, his face twisted in frustration. Plates clattered. Customers turned to stare. It was the kind of moment every restaurant worker fears, the moment when patience snaps. And tonight, that moment had arrived. He had been working here for years, giving everything he had. Early mornings, long shifts, endless complaints. And yet, nothing seemed to get easier. The tips were low, the stress was high, and the exhaustion was written all over his face. He had reached the edge. His mind raced. Maybe this is it. Maybe I should just quit. I've had enough. But then, the door opened. A tall figure stepped inside, calm yet commanding. The kind of presence that makes people stop in their tracks. It was Steven Seagal. Not here for fame, not here for attention, but for something far more powerful. The waiter didn't notice him at first. He was too lost in his own frustration, too focused on leaving. The camera would catch every detail, Seagal's slow, deliberate movements, his eyes scanning the room, his gaze settling on the young man. Something about him said, "I know exactly what you're feeling." The music swells, a subtle tension rising. You can almost feel the energy shift in the room. The waiter's co-workers notice him too, whispering quietly, their curiosity growing. And then the moment freezes, just for a heartbeat. A pause. You can almost hear the waiter's thoughts echoing. Who is this guy? Why is he here now? But here's the thing. What Steven Seagal said next didn't just stop the waiter from quitting. It changed something inside him. Something deeper than just a job, deeper than a single night's frustration. It was one sentence. One powerful sentence that made him reconsider everything he thought he knew about his limits, his purpose, and his ability to keep going when he wanted to give up. By the end of this video, you're going to see not just what Seagal said, but how it transformed this young man completely. And if you've ever felt like giving up on something that matters, this story might just change the way you see your own struggles. On-screen text cue. He was about to quit, until he heard these words. The young waiter's day hadn't started like this. It had begun with a long, monotonous morning shift, his uniform already wrinkled, his shoes scuffed from running between tables for hours. Every face in the restaurant seemed to blur together, customers absorbed in their own conversations, oblivious to the stress behind the counter. He had been working here for nearly 3 years, giving everything he had. But lately, it felt like nothing was enough. Orders kept piling up, tips were inconsistent, and the manager's criticisms seemed endless. Each day, he carried more weight, more frustration, more doubt. And every night, he went home exhausted, questioning whether this was worth it. Outside the restaurant, life hadn't been any easier. Bills were piling up. Friends were moving on with their lives, chasing careers, traveling, building futures. Meanwhile, he felt stuck, trapped in a cycle of constant effort with little reward. Deep down, he wondered if maybe he just wasn't cut out for success. Maybe he was failing not just at this job, but at life itself. And that's when the pressure hit him the hardest. A particularly difficult table had made their frustrations clear, complaining about every detail. The manager had snapped at him for a small mistake, and one of his co-workers had ignored him when he needed help. All these small moments compounded, piling up like bricks on his shoulders. By the time the last customer left, he was at the edge, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It was in this state of near defeat that he noticed the door swing open. At first, he barely registered the newcomer. But something about the way the man moved, the calm confidence, the quiet authority, made him pause. He had seen plenty of famous people before, but there was something different about this presence. It wasn't about fame, it wasn't about recognition, it was something deeper, something almost magnetic. And as he looked closer, he realized who it was, Steven Seagal. The name alone carried weight. But in this moment, the waiter didn't care about the fame. He was too consumed with his own struggles, too absorbed in his thoughts of quitting, too exhausted to even process the presence of someone so iconic. This was the perfect moment to reflect on his journey. Every spilled drink, every complaint, every long, grueling shift had led him to this point. Every moment of self-doubt, every time he thought about leaving, every thought of giving up, it all converged in this one instant. He felt cornered, trapped, and completely alone in his frustration. And this is where you, the viewer, should pause and ask yourself, have you ever felt this way? Like giving up was the only option, and no one could understand what you were going through. Think about that for a moment. Reflect on the times in your life when the weight of the world seemed too heavy, when you felt invisible, unheard, or defeated. Because that is exactly how he felt. And yet, in the midst of that weight, the unexpected arrival of Seagal created a spark, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. Something about his presence suggested that change was possible. That maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over. That maybe the words he was about to hear could break through the frustration, the doubt, and the fear. This moment set the stage for what was coming next, the turning point that would define not just this night, but potentially the rest of his life. And it's a reminder that sometimes, the universe has a way of sending exactly what we need at the exact moment we need it. On-screen text cue, but what Steven Seagal said next would change everything. Could it change your perspective too? The waiter froze for a moment, caught between two worlds, the one he knew, with all its stress and frustration, and the unknown that had just entered through the restaurant door. He glanced at Steven Seagal, whose calm gaze seemed to pierce right through him. It was as if Seagal could see every doubt, every fear, every frustration that had been quietly eating away at the young man for years. For a few long seconds, time seemed to stretch. The clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation, even the flickering lights of the restaurant faded into the background. All that existed was the waiter, his emotions raw and fraying, and the man who had suddenly become the center of his world. He took a shaky breath. His thoughts raced. Why is he here? Why now? What could he possibly know about what I'm going through? Every instinct told him to retreat, to ignore this moment and escape back into his routine of complaints and resignation. But something deep inside, told him to stay. As Seagal slowly approached, the waiter's heartbeat quickened. He could feel the weight of every decision he had made in the past months, the mistakes, the failures, the endless hours of effort without recognition. Each one seemed to converge at this very moment, like a wave threatening to pull him under. He felt vulnerable, exposed, and yet, oddly alert. The co-workers nearby whispered under their breaths, stealing glances at the scene unfolding. They had seen difficult moments before, but nothing like this. Everyone could sense it. Something important was about to happen. And while the waiter's eyes were fixed on Seagal, there was a subtle question in the air, a tension that seemed to hang heavier than the smell of cooking oil or the hum of fluorescent lights. Seagal didn't rush. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded attention, drawing the young man into a space where words weren't yet necessary. But as he drew closer, the subtle shift in energy became almost palpable. The waiter's internal struggle intensified. Should I speak first? Should I leave before this gets awkward? Is this really going to matter? This is where the suspense is critical. The audience, watching the video, feels it too. They've been introduced to the stakes, a young man on the verge of giving up, a mentor figure entering at the perfect moment, and the looming question of what will happen next. By prolonging the moment just enough, you create an emotional tension that keeps viewers glued to the screen. To enhance this, imagine the camera cutting between shots, the waiter's eyes darting nervously, Seagal's steady, unwavering gaze, the co-workers leaning subtly to watch, and the customers beginning to notice the unusual tension. The music rises slowly, a low hum that suggests anticipation, suspense, and the imminent arrival of something profound. And then, for a brief instant, the waiter almost turns away. His instincts scream to escape the vulnerability he feels, to retreat into the comfort of the known. But before he can step back, he hears it, the subtle sound of Seagal's voice, calm yet firm, just close enough to catch his attention. The camera lingers on that moment, holding the tension, allowing viewers to feel the same heartbeat-quickening anticipation the waiter feels. The question hanging in the air is simple, but powerful. What could he possibly say that would make me stay, when everything inside me says leave? At this point, you can also include a short engagement cue for the audience. If you were in his shoes, about to give up on something you care about deeply, what would you hope someone would say to you? Comment below. We'll see how your answer compares to what happens next. Every second stretches. The waiter's hands tremble slightly, gripping the tray like a lifeline. His chest tightens. He feels exposed, vulnerable, yet there's a glimmer of curiosity, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger has something to offer. And that is where the moment reaches its peak tension. All of the waiter's struggles, fears, and doubts are now concentrated in a single heartbeat. The audience is fully engaged, hanging on the edge of their seats, desperate to know what Seagal will say next. Finally, Seagal takes one step closer, pauses, and looks directly into the waiter's eyes. The energy in the room shifts subtly. It's almost imperceptible, but the change is real. The kind of moment where the world seems to pause, where everything else fades, and all that matters is what comes next. On-screen text cue. And then, he said something the waiter, and everyone watching, would never forget. The room seemed to hold its breath. All the noise, the clattering dishes, the soft hum of conversation, the footsteps of other staff, faded into a low, distant murmur. All that remained was the waiter and Steven Seagal, standing mere feet apart, their eyes locked. For the young man, this was a moment of pure tension. Every instinct screamed to flee, to escape the vulnerability, to leave before the weight of expectation crushed him. Yet another part of him, a small, fragile spark of curiosity, held him in place. He wanted to know what this man could possibly say to make a difference. Seagal's presence alone was commanding, but now he spoke. His voice was calm, measured, and filled with authority, yet there was warmth behind it, a depth that immediately resonated. "You're stronger than you think," he said. Those words weren't loud, but they landed like a hammer hitting an invisible wall. The waiter froze. "Stronger than I think," he whispered internally, repeating the phrase like a mantra he had never known he needed. Every syllable carried weight. Every pause was deliberate. Seagal continued, "It's easy to quit when life pushes you to the edge. But the people who achieve greatness, they keep going, even when everything inside them says stop." At this moment, the camera should cut to close-ups, the waiter's eyes widening, his jaw tightening, hands gripping the tray with a little less certainty now. His mind races. He recalls all the challenges, all the moments when quitting seemed inevitable, but now, those same moments feel different, reframed in the light of this one conversation. Seagal leaned slightly closer, not intimidating, but commanding attention. "Every mistake you've made, every failure, every moment of doubt, it doesn't define you. It's shaping you. And one day, when you look back, you'll see that those moments were the stepping stones to everything you've been capable of becoming." The weight of the words hit the waiter. It was more than just motivation. It was clarity. Every long shift, every spilled tray, every customer complaint suddenly had a purpose. They were not signs of weakness. They were evidence of endurance, of resilience, of strength that he had never recognized in himself. A long pause. Seagal's gaze softens, almost like he can see inside the waiter's mind, reading every fear and hesitation. "You're not failing. You're learning. You're growing. And quitting, that's never the answer." For the audience, this is the emotional climax, the moment they've been waiting for. Every second, every camera angle, every dramatic pause is designed to let the weight of the words sink in. Cut to the waiter's trembling hands, a subtle nod, a tear threatening to fall. The music swells, then softens, mirroring the internal shift in the young man. And then Seagal delivers the line that seals the transformation: "The only limits you have are the ones you believe in. Stop believing in them." At that instant, the tension breaks. The waiter exhales slowly, as if he's been holding his breath for years. His shoulders relax slightly. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now hold a spark of determination. The audience should see it, the shift in posture, the subtle changes in facial expression, the moment of realization that everything could change from this single encounter. This is the moment that turns the story from suspense to resolution, but the payoff is still stretched out, giving the audience time to process the impact of Seagal's words and emotionally connect. Use slow-motion shots, soft lighting, and reaction cuts of coworkers and even the restaurant customers who notice the shift. Every detail reinforces the emotional climax. On-screen text cue, one sentence, one moment. Everything changed. For a moment, the world seemed suspended. The waiter stood frozen, Seagal's words echoing in his mind. "The only limits you have are the ones you believe in." The phrase repeated itself, looping like a mantra, as if the universe had whispered directly into his soul. His hands trembled slightly, loosening their grip on the tray he had been holding like a lifeline. He exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he had been holding for hours, maybe even days. Every ounce of frustration, doubt, and fatigue he had been carrying seemed to press down on him, and then, slowly, started to lift. The co-workers, watching from a distance, exchanged glances. Something had shifted. The air was different now, lighter, charged with a quiet electricity. The tension that had gripped the room moments ago had melted into something else. Anticipation, possibility, hope. The waiter looked down at the tray in his hands, then at the floor, and back up at Seagal. His eyes were wide, glistening with emotion. He opened his mouth, ready to speak, but no words came out immediately. He was processing, letting the meaning of the sentences sink in. It was as if every past failure, every misstep, every moment of wanting to give up was suddenly reframed. What had seemed like obstacles were now stepping stones. Seagal, noticing the subtle change, gave a nod, a quiet affirmation, not loud or dramatic, just enough to let the young man know that this moment was his to claim. And claim it he did. Slowly, deliberately, the waiter lifted his head, squared his shoulders, and a flicker of determination appeared in his gaze. This is the moment to stretch the video's emotional arc, show the physical transformation alongside the internal one. A trembling hand steadies. A furrowed brow smooths. The shoulders that were hunched in defeat rise slightly, hinting at newfound confidence. Every small gesture signals growth, and every viewer is subconsciously invested. They've witnessed the tension, the turning point, and now the first sparks of transformation. At this point, insert a short audience engagement question to increase interaction and retention. If someone said this to you in your toughest moment, would it change your path? Comment yes if it would, or no if you think it wouldn't. Let's see who relates. The waiter's first words finally come, quiet at first, almost a whisper. I think I understand now. I've been looking at everything wrong. I won't quit. The camera should linger on that moment. A close-up of the eyes, glistening with emotion. A slight nod. The faintest smile. And the subtle exhale of relief. This is the payoff the audience has been waiting for. The moment where hope overtakes doubt, where hesitation transforms into resolve. Seagal steps back slightly, giving the young man space to absorb the weight of his own decision. The music softens, a gentle underscore that complements the emotional release. It's not triumphant yet, it's quiet, personal, intimate. The real transformation is internal, and the audience feels it. But the story doesn't end there. The waiter, now steadier, looks around at the restaurant, the messy tables, the scattered dishes, the frustrated customers, and sees it differently. What once seemed overwhelming now appears manageable, solvable, even meaningful. The job, the environment, the challenges, they haven't disappeared, but his perspective has shifted. That shift is enough to keep him moving forward. This is also the perfect moment to stretch the suspense slightly, hinting at further growth. Little did he know, this one conversation would not only save his night but also set him on a path he never imagined. A path that would change how he saw himself forever. Add reaction shots, co-workers noticing the change, customers observing quietly, maybe a small gesture, a co-worker placing a hand lightly on his shoulder, a subtle acknowledgement of the shift. Every detail reinforces the emotional arc, keeping viewers invested. Finally, Part 5 ends on a mini cliffhanger for Part 6. He thought it was just a single conversation. But the real test, the real challenge, was only just beginning. How would he use this newfound strength? That's what you'll see next. The young waiter took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift just slightly from his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, or maybe months, he felt clarity. He looked around the restaurant, noticing the same tables, the same dishes, the same customers. Yet, somehow, everything felt different. The chaos no longer seemed insurmountable. The fatigue was still there, but now it felt manageable. Each step he took was deliberate. Each movement carried newfound confidence. His colleagues noticed it immediately. Small gestures, a smile here, a nod there, revealed the subtle change in his energy. The once tense posture softened, his shoulders no longer slumped in defeat. Every glance around the room reflected not just relief, but determination. He returned to his station and began working, but it wasn't the same. The tasks that had previously felt like a punishment now seemed like opportunities. Every interaction, every dish delivered, every customer served became a chance to demonstrate his resilience and growth. The restaurant itself became a stage for his transformation. This is also the perfect time to include a reflective moment for the audience. Have you ever faced a moment where you thought giving up was your only option? What did you do instead? Comment below. I want to hear your story. The waiter's first challenge after this shift of mindset came immediately. A difficult table, the kind that would normally trigger frustration, approached. Instead of tension and dread, he greeted them with calm professionalism and patience. Mistakes happened, as they always do, but he didn't crumble under them. He adjusted, adapted, and moved forward, remembering Seagal's words, "Every mistake shapes you, don't let it define you." Slowly, his confidence grew throughout the night. Orders were taken with precision, customers smiled, co-workers noticed, and even the manager, observing quietly from across the room, seemed to recognize the change. It was subtle but undeniable. This young man was no longer trapped by his past struggles. He had learned to harness them. This transformation wasn't instantaneous. It was layered, like a slow sunrise spreading warmth across a cold landscape. Each task completed, each customer served, each small success reinforced the message Seagal had delivered. It was no longer about avoiding failure. It was about embracing the process, learning, and moving forward with intention. Even the co-workers began to interact differently with him. A nod here, a smile there, tiny acknowledgments that reflected not just his renewed energy, but the ripple effect of one powerful moment of guidance. What started as a single conversation had now influenced an entire environment. To keep the audience mentally engaged, add a short, reflective question here. If one sentence could change your mindset, what would you want it to say? Type it in the comments. I'm curious what would inspire you most. By the end of the shift, the waiter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just a fleeting hope, but a grounded, actionable hope that gave him strength to continue. He realized that challenges were inevitable, but his approach to them could change everything. Quitting was no longer an option. It was a choice he had consciously rejected. As he cleaned the last table, he looked up at Seagal, who was watching quietly from the corner. A small smile passed between them, a wordless acknowledgement of understanding, guidance, and transformation. It was a silent moment, but one that carried more weight than anything spoken aloud. And then, as the night wound down, the waiter paused for a final reflection. The struggles, the failures, the moments of doubt, they hadn't disappeared. But now, they were part of his story, part of his growth, and part of his journey toward resilience and strength. He felt ready, not just for the rest of the night, but for life beyond this restaurant. On-screen text cue, one conversation. One choice. A lifetime of change. As the night drew to a close, the waiter stood behind the counter, quietly reflecting on everything that had just happened. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a profound sense of calm and clarity. What had started as frustration, fatigue, and despair had transformed into focus, determination, and hope, all in the span of a single evening. He thought back to the words Steven Seagal had spoken, "The only limits you have are the ones you believe in." It wasn't just a motivational line, it was a philosophy, a lens through which he could see his life differently. Every struggle, every moment of doubt, every time he felt like giving up, could now be reframed as a stepping stone toward growth. The waiter realized something important. Change doesn't always come from big gestures or sudden miracles. Sometimes, it comes from a single sentence, a single encounter, or a single choice. And it's the choice, to persevere, to believe in yourself, to refuse to give up, that ultimately shapes the path forward. He looked around the restaurant one last time before the night ended. The dishes, the tables, the customers, they were still there. But now, everything felt lighter. The same environment that had felt like a cage now felt like an opportunity, a place where he could not only survive but thrive. For the audience, this is the moment to reflect. Life often tests us with challenges, doubts, and moments where giving up seems like the easiest option. But just like the waiter, we all have the ability to shift our perspective, embrace our challenges, and find strength in moments of guidance, wisdom, or even a simple word of encouragement. Here's a short audience engagement question to reinforce connection. Have you ever had one conversation or moment that completely changed your mindset? Share it in the comments. I want to hear your story. As he walked out of the restaurant that night, the waiter felt lighter, stronger, and ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just leaving the restaurant. He was stepping into a new chapter of his life, armed with resilience and a renewed sense of purpose. He knew challenges would still come, but he also knew that quitting was no longer an option. And that's the takeaway for every viewer. Sometimes, it only takes one sentence, one moment, or one person to spark a transformation. The world around you doesn't always change, but your perspective can, and that perspective can change everything. If this story inspired you, imagine what small changes in your life could do if you refuse to give up. Imagine the potential within yourself waiting to be unlocked by persistence, belief, and a shift in perspective. On-screen text cue, one moment can change everything. What's yours? Before you go, if you felt inspired by this story and want to see more powerful stories that motivate, challenge, and transform, don't forget to hit the like button. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Also, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video that could spark a moment of change in your life. And if this story resonated with you, comment below. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or even tag someone who might need to hear this today. Your words could inspire someone else, just like Seagal inspired our waiter. Finally, remember, life will always have obstacles, but the choice to rise above them is always yours. One decision, one moment, one perspective can transform everything. And sometimes, all it takes is listening, reflecting, and believing in yourself. On-screen text cue, like, comment, subscribe, and never stop believing in yourself. With that, the story closes, but the lessons stay. The waiter's journey is a reminder to all of us. Even in the toughest moments, there's always hope, there's always growth, and there's always a way forward.